When people try to learn a language, what do they usually do? They use apps like Duolingo, get a textbook, maybe take some kind of a course, right? But how many of them actually get fluent? Very few. I know people who have been studying for months or even years and they still can't hold a simple conversation. I used to be in the same spot doing those same things and it didn't get me anywhere. So if that sounds like yourself and you're not making great progress, I think the best thing you could do right now is quit and just basically ignore studying and totally change your approach. Because for most people, studying is a big trap and something that takes up way too much time that could go to other things that really get you fluent. And when I realized that, I went from struggling to today speaking 4 or 5 languages. So I want to talk about that today and what to do instead. So back a long time ago, I took Spanish in school for about a year. And like most people, I brutally failed because that school system is not made for teaching you languages, and we all pretty much know that. But for some reason, when we start learning languages ourselves at home or by ourselves, we tend to just kind of fall into the same traps. And we go back to studying rules and studying words, sort of like we did in school, but now we instead pick our own resources and our own apps. And it feels a little bit more fun, but it still gets us the same really bad results. So after failing with Spanish in school, I decided to try again by myself. And at first I actually made quite good progress. I started learning a lot of words and a lot of common grammar rules pretty quickly, because I think my method was a lot more effective, even though it wasn't perfect. But a few months in, I hit sort of a roadblock. And so whenever I tried to listen to the language, or I got into a conversation with someone, or I tried to just kind of construct longer sentences and speak, I just shut down. Like my brain just shut down. I could not understand things without like pausing the video and really thinking through. And I couldn't really speak properly either because I always had to translate every word in my head. And so whenever I wanted to say something, I was like, what's that word in English? And then what was the translation in Spanish? And then I kind of went from there. And that took a long time to construct sentences because I always had to think. And it just made speaking and communicating a real hassle. And so the funny thing is that my mom speaks Spanish fluently from having lived there for a while. And sometimes I'd ask her questions about what a word means or kind of a new grammar rule I'd learned or whatever. And she pretty much always knew how to explain it to me. But what was interesting was that she never explained things in direct translations, or she never knew the actual grammar rules. Like she'd never thought about them, but she knew them perfectly. Which kind of perplexed me because up until this point, all I'd known was that you gotta study a grammar rule to get good at using it. But then I realized and I heard about something called comprehensible input. Basically, the idea that you can listen to a language and pick things up that way, which is really interesting. So I quit studying almost completely and I went full all in on just listening to the language. I started by watching pretty easy YouTube videos and then I went on to more complex YouTube videos. And after a few weeks, this problem of translating in my head completely disappeared, essentially, and I was able to understand full-on Spanish conversations pretty well. Of course, I wasn't perfect yet because I'd only been studying for a few months, but the words that I knew now automatically got registered in my brain when I heard them, and they didn't before. So why did that happen? Like, what was the problem I had, and how could I struggle so much despite knowing the words and grammar that I was hearing? Well, think back for a second to your native language. I bet that you probably did not see every single word explained to you in definitions, and you didn't learn things by translating and like learning all the grammar rules mechanically, right? Piecing them together like some sort of Tetris puzzle. You just learned via people like your parents, like your teachers, like your friends around you, using words and using grammar to explain and describe different scenarios, different situations. Like when it was time to eat, they said that in your native language and you just picked it up and you associated food with to eat, basically. And that's how we learn everything. But then for some reason, when it's time to learn a new language as an adult, we completely forget about that. We know from school that just memorizing things does not work to get us fluent. So why are we doing that as adults trying to learn by ourselves? That is something that I don't really get, but it's incredibly common. I think part of it is because it's uncomfortable to learn like children do. And it feels really weird to just sit there and listen to something that you really don't understand much of and to feel kind of stupid for not understanding it. So we think that we want to use our adult brain power to really think our way to fluency. But you can't think your way to something that's supposed to happen without thinking. I'm not speaking by thinking what words I want to say and then pairing them together with grammar rules right now. I'm just speaking. I know what to say, and I know that if I mess up, I know that I messed up, but I don't necessarily know why. And that's exactly how you're supposed to learn a language and how you're supposed to use a language. So the practical way to implement this and how to learn a language in this more natural way is simple. You want to spend a lot of time immersing yourself in the language, listening to the language, reading the language, listening to podcasts, watching TV shows, watching YouTube videos, anything that gets the language into your ears and that gets you exposed to its natural form, essentially. The reason this works so well and why studying just isn't enough is because there's so much nuance and context in a language that you just can't really get from a textbook. There's so many ways to use individual words, and there's so many times where one word might mean something very similar to another word, but you would never use this word and you'd only use this word. These are things that a textbook or Duolingo just simply can't explain to you. And if you just learn a word via one simple translation from this language to this language, you won't understand these nuances. And if you learn grammar rules by just memorizing grammar rules, they'll always be kind of conscious in your head, and you'll have to pause and think to apply them. And you don't want to speak that way because it's exhausting. What I did, and the simplest way to get started doing this, is to just search for beginner comprehensible inputs and your language on YouTube. You'll find plenty of YouTube channels, at least if it's a popular language like Spanish, Japanese, maybe French, Italian, etc., that talk in slow, simple Italian or Japanese that you can follow along with. And the core thing here is that you don't actually have to understand everything to make progress. You just have to understand a good bit of it. So for a while in the beginning, it can definitely make sense to study, to learn a few common words, to learn a few common grammar rules, so that you can understand this basic content. But it really doesn't take much to understand a simple video using like the 100 most common words. Because very often, these videos will also be accompanied by visuals and people drawing or people pointing towards things. And if I just take something and I say, these are a pair of headphones, for example, and I hold them up right here, it's very easy to understand, right? So if you've been studying a language a lot, but you still really struggle with conversations, this is almost certainly the thing that's missing from your routine. And the majority of your time should be spent doing things like this. Listening, reading, also having real conversations, right? Getting this feedback and hearing people express themselves to you and you having to process it. And eventually you'll just pick up how native speakers actually express themselves, because that can be radically different from a textbook. With that being said though, is studying actually useless or does it have some merit? Well, I think that it's an incredibly useful tool. And what I'm telling you is not necessarily to quit studying forever. I'm just telling you that if all you've been doing is studying, you've likely over-indexed on studying and you need to spend a lot of time over-indexing on listening now to kind of balance the scales a little bit. Doesn't mean you quit studying forever. Doesn't mean that it's the biggest sin you can make, right? It's totally fine to study. It's just that you can get fluent by not studying, but you can't get fluent by only studying. Studying can do what I call the acceleration principle. Basically, that learning a word a little bit in the beginning through studying can help you spot it when you later see it in your comprehensible inputs in your listening practice, but it will not take you all the way. So it can get you from 0% learned to maybe 10, 20, maybe 30% learned, but to get all the way up here, to get a full understanding of the word, you need to see it plenty of times in real life. And it can also help you go from 0 to kind of like mini beginner, whatever you want to call it, like complete beginner, but it won't even get you to an intermediate level. It can't. With that being said, that's really all I wanted to say in this video, and I hope that if you're new to learning a language, that you might start implementing this, because it's truly what changed my language learning, and I know so many people who would drastically benefit from it. Now, if you want to learn more about language learning and find out about my best lessons, tips, systems, and hacks to learn a language more effectively, I recommend you check out my 21-day free email course about language learning and exactly how to get fluent. There's a link to that in the description, and I appreciate you watching. I'll see you next time. And until then, keep learning.